दिल ढूंढता है फिर वही trans voice को. Trans voice, a voice which is not by gender conditioning, but a voice which we are to be us, ours. I'm quite okay to kind of open my voice as it is, because being on testosterone every day the voice is like different while singing and while practicing. So I also wanted to share that kind of an experience with trans men or transgender people who are into singing experience, and how they kind of deal with it is the whole idea. Yeah. So initially, when Sunil and I started working together, we kind of had a very I mean, other people trained us into trying to understand what it meant, what does sexuality mean, and what does gender mean. So we had very strict. So man means male assigned, who can be a trans woman, Kothi. I'm talking very local specific terms. Kothi, Didi, Hijra, and Mangalamukhi. uh, Woman as in female means trans man, bisexual, lesbian. Just three categories. So Sunil and I were like very uncomfortable about this, and then we started feeling how is that when it comes to female assigned, we do not have multiple genders, while the reality of male assigned people's histories, because they have histories, we manage to see that there are lots of identities which are um, beyond binaries. So the very Kothi system, that is before you get into the Hijra system, there is a Kothi system where lots of men who live in pant shirts are feminine, and their feelings are feminine, and so they represent different genders over there. And then Sunil and I had a very long discussion about this, saying why do we female assigned people do not have multiple gender identities or expressions. So before we get into this identity and expression, so initially the language that we always spoke was about gender identities. So gender identity was something which would always box people into one particular, like your, when you say identity, though we say identity is fluid, it is somewhat fixing. That's when Sunil and I started thinking about why female assigned people do not have multiple genders, and how, where is the space for them to express, where is the history, and where is the mythology for them. And that's when we understood the story of Shikhandi. That's when we came to know that it's actually a woman who was taken up to be a neither man nor woman kind of a body. So it is mostly based on a trans man, or a more, if you want to say more understandably, then it is more about how a female person decides to move beyond genders to take part in a battlefield, and how that gets appropriated again by the male assigned, because the male assigned somehow have histories and mythologies and so on. So that led us into in our very first work, when we were doing the research on crisis of intervention on female assigned sexual and gender, marginalized sexual and genders. That's when we started recollecting these histories and mythologies and started trying to understand. And then we found out that that there was, of course, there was a paper which spoke about how the Jain Tirthankaras, the 13th or 12th Tirthankara, actually sits and not stands, and so that person is actually a female assigned person. This is one of the um, redefining articles that we read, and then there is also a particular a practice in Himachal Pradesh, which is called sadhin, where after when when you attain maturity, if you do not want to survive as a female assigned person, being a woman, then you don't need to. You can shift to being sadhin, who can express their gender in multiple different ways. So these are just like two small instances that we got a breakthrough in the history of female assigned. That's when Sunil actually shared. So Sunil and I had this very bad habit of working overnight and talking overnight and drinking overnight. So then we have a long conversation with each other, and sometimes we disturb our friends also, like Chanika, Pony, and many others. So in this whole process, we then landed upon this argument saying gender is not an identity. It is made an identity even for heterosexual people, because in any forms, the legal and administrative forms, you don't need gender. You need your caste and you need other things. But then there came up an issue about women's reservation and how when you identify as woman, you get certain rights, and if we ignore gender, what will happen then? So we were actually at that point of time. This I'm telling around 2010, 12, 13, 14, 15. We argued that for a long time. So we then said, let's make something called as gender minorities, where genders do not become an identity for claiming certain benefits or reservations, etc., etc. It can be it should be identified, because when you say women's reservation, there are different kinds of women, starting from Adivasi women, Dalit women, Muslim women, marginalized women, working class women, your OBC women, EWS women, and so many other kinds of women. We also do have marginalized genders who are trans women, people who identify as women, people who take on the role of women, and with that we wanted to add one more point saying gender minorities, where we included all people who would transition their genders and try to express themselves in a different manner apart from their cisgenders. Now, this was the time when Sunil and I were saying that gender is actually not an identity; it's a expression. Because how do you express yourself? How do you assert your gender? Is the question first that we have. So, work is associated with a certain gender. I mean, stereotypes. And then roles are associated with a certain gender. That the person who nurtures will be the mother, the person who takes care is the father. These kind of associations were the problematic fields for us, because how do you express yourself was a totally different thing altogether. So, if you cry, you're a woman. If you don't cry, you're not a woman. But then there are some people who cannot cry at the instant moment. We need some time to cry, and we need to we express ourselves very differently than others. So that's when like we started feeling that gender actually is a uh, expression, and definitely not, because we choose our expressions. We choose our expressions. And see, the choice is not very easily accessible to everybody. Now, people are forced to choose a certain expression because they are assigned. But then people who kind of break the assigned and then try to choose, then there are also restrictions, because you need to belong to a box. What we wanted to really do was to break that box and say that there are no three genders, there are no four genders, there are no five genders, but there are multiple genders. And that's why the state, as in the government, even though they make the transgender bill, transgender act, etc., they can see transgender but not third, fourth, fifth gender or sixth gender. And that argument is still going on, the use of third gender. The third gender use is something that Sunil, me, and a few people in this part of the community we oppose very vehemently, saying that we do not accept male as the first gender. Why are we supposed to be third gender? We don't need to be third gender. We're equal genders with everybody. So this whole thing about first, second, third is very weird. That's when we started talking about a whole lot of histories of people, which we started documenting from the year 2013, and we try to understand, because for us it was very clear that if you do not document the histories of people, then we are lost. What happened to the female assigned marginalized sexualities and genders was that their histories and their mythology was never documented. It was never clearly stated anywhere. And that's why we do not have a discourse today. In order to develop that, we actually took up the work, but then of course we did not exclusively work on female assigned people, but then we also took every sexual and marginalized sexualities and genders, but then we kind of tried to put together narratives of female assigned people to think of how they express themselves and what are their histories and so on. So, even now, Sunil and I work, especially if you look at Ambedkar's work, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's work, his writings and his um, understanding of the basic fundamental rights. Now, that itself will make it very clear if you go through all the articles, the fundamental articles, and so on. It will give us a clear picture that it is nowhere gender restrictive. That itself is the base for us to understand that there is a transfeminist argument of moving not just beyond gender binary, but it is moving to an argument where multiple gender expressions can be accepted. Nowhere it says, of course, and the constitution, if you look at the difference between the constitution and IPC, is that the constitution never uses the term universal pronoun he and him. The constitution uses the word person, and the IPC actually uses the universal term, universal pronoun called he and him everywhere, and that's what they explain in the first three sections, I suppose. So, if you look at the constitution and try to understand, uh, there is no restriction for any expression of gender. There is no restriction for any expression of gender or any kind of expressing of your gender. If you want, you can box it. If you don't want, you can be fluid. You can still unbox yourself and then continue to survive as a female. Now that's the most uh, brilliant part of the constitution. So even when we were doing the crisis intervention from the age, from the time of 1999 till now, we constantly, even though there is NASA judgment, the 377 judgments and Trans Act, Trans Rules, etc., we still go back to the Constitution when we are actually handling it in the police stations, because police also should not have the assumption that there were only three genders. So I'll now try and perform a little bit because I'm not in a too good form to perform, but then I'll try and perform a little. This is a 1.5 hour performance, so I won't be able to do it fully. I'll just do one part of it, which is around like 5-10 minutes, and then we can start discussing. So in my dead name is Sumati, and Sumati ആ പേരിൽ തന്നെ വശപ്പശക്കുണ്ട്. അതൊരു പേരാണോ? പണ്ട് മലയാളം സിനിമയിലെ എല്ലാ നല്ല സ്ത്രീകൾക്കും സുമതി എന്ന പേരുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ഞാൻ ഒരിക്കലും നല്ല സ്ത്രീയല്ല, അല്ല സ്ത്രീയേ അല്ല. ആണല്ല പെണ്ണല്ല അടിപൊളി വേഷം. സബ്രംഗിലെ ഒരു കമ്മിങ് ഔട്ട് പ്രോഗ്രാമിലെ എന്നെ ഉഷ കൊണ്ടുപോയി. അന്ന് ഞാൻ ഫമീല, വിനയ്, മനോഹർ, അരവിന്ദ് പിന്നെ ചതുര സംസാരിച്ചത് കേട്ടു. ചതുര പറഞ്ഞ എല്ലാ കാര്യങ്ങളും എനിക്ക് ഞാൻ ജീവിച്ച പോലെ തോന്നി. അന്ന് ഫസ്റ്റ് എനിക്ക് ഒരു വാക്ക് കിട്ടി, ലെസ്ബിയൻ. അത് ഞാൻ. പക്ഷേ I learned the politics of love from Famila. In Thrissur, for the first time when we went on a romantic stroll, അവളാണ് ഞാൻ ട്രാൻസ്മാൻ എന്ന് മനസ്സിലാക്കിയത്. അവൾ പറഞ്ഞു, നീ സർജറി ചെയ്യുവാണെങ്കിൽ ഞാൻ നിന്നെ സപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യും. I'll just translate this bit because it's in Malayalam. Sumati. There's a problem within that name. Uh, Su as in good and Mati means good mind, a good heart. Uh, do you even think it's a name? In all the old Malayalam cinemas, all good women were named Sumati. But I am not even a good woman. Of course, I'm not a woman. It's not a woman, it's not a man. It's a brilliant mask. That's the song. In Sapran, once Usha, my friend, had taken me to for a program. It was a coming out program. That day I heard Famila, Vinay, Manohar, Arvind, and Chatura. And when Chatura spoke to me, I realized that she is speaking very much kind of experience that I had in my life. And that was the first day I got a word that kind of reflected my sexuality, and that word was called lesbian. But then, within 2 years, when I first learned politics of love from Famila in Thrissur for the first time when we went on a romantic stroll. First time Famila found out that I actually am a trans man, and she said, if you want to, this is in the year 2001, where a lot of people could not even think of surgeries for female assigned people, for trans women. And that's when she said that she was ready to help me out and support me in that whole process. खुसरो ने फरमाया, साहिर ने दोहराया, बहुत कठिन है डगर पनघट की, पैर फिसलती है नुकीले पत्थर, चमड़ी उखाड़ लेती है, लहरों तरंग में घुल जाती है खून. Uh, Instead of reading out the original, I'll just try to translate and read out the English parts so that you can understand. In my childhood, whenever I used to sing, my first fascination was Pandit Bhimsen Joshi, his voice. I wanted to sing in his voice, and I started singing in his voice. My teacher did not say anything. After some time, it was Dr. Gangubai Hangal, and that voice was like Allahu. I wanted to sing like her, and then I started singing like her in her voice. Then also my teacher did not say anything. Then it became Mansoor, then it became Zohra, and then my voice started walking and journeying in different roads. Where at the end to the roads? Roads keep opening and closing. The voice, the footsteps of the voice starts feeling the moist of the grass, the burning of the tar roads, the sandy experience of feeling the uh, deserts on your foot. Then it is the touch of the earth, the mud, everything on your voice. There were many layers that opened up. I didn't know which was my voice, whether it was Fayaz or Gangu or Mansoor or Zohra. In between the lives of being man and woman, the struggle of taking what I was assigned, showed in my voice, in my lowest pitch, and I'm still in search. If you ask anybody generally to sing, they'll sing in a voice that is gender conditioned. Nobody sings, if you're instantly asked, nobody sings in a voice that is exactly their speaking voice. And the example is one of my trans sisters, Madhuri, who is no more now. She used to sing in this kind of a voice. Choke nanu belliya minchu kannu kattiya anchu palige bidaga. So she would try to squeak and sing like a female, while the original song is like this. Joke nanu belliya minchu kannu kattiya anchu ಬಲೆಗೆ ಬಿದ್ದಾಗ ನೀ ಹಿಡಿವೆ ಈ ಸಂಚು. Ah. By 2005, I decided that I should not fall into the trap of melodious female voice and started singing in my kind of a voice, even though it would strain me. Trans voice. I first felt it in Sonu when he first sang, then Deepu, and then G, and then Akai, and then others. दिल ढूंढता है फिर वही trans voice को. Trans voice, a voice which is not by gender conditioning, but a voice which we are to be us, ours, to sing what we can the way we are. Sonu first, when he sang, I was touched by his voice texture, opposed to all stereotypical conditioning of genders. He used to sing, Oru chirikandal, karnikandal, adumadi. Trance voice, that's a experience of the touch of the voice, its textures. And when in 2007 Deepu came, I knew immediately that my concept of trance voice was confirmed because by listening to his speaking voice, I could figure out what his singing voice was. A voice that goes beyond man, woman, genders. It's a expression that we can feel in our skin. Thank you.
Hi. So I heard you talk about the trans voice and it I almost cried because I have been a singer all my life and I started taking testosterone and lost it. Now I hurt when I sing. My
Hmm.
voice hurts. It I feel like it is stuck in a middle ground somewhere of registers of pitches that I haven't figured out. And so I just wanted to ask you, for me, the trans voice, my trans voice, is constantly marked by a certain sense of loss and a grief and all the sort of theoretical uh, weight that I process every single day about we need to move beyond binaries and all of that. Somehow I'm not able to internalize that and sit with my voice as a voice as a voice that has its own body and that it has its own identity. I keep wanting to be either in the male register or the female register to sound something like what I was. And I was just wondering how, when you think about your trans voice or the trans voice, how do you think about that loss? Is that something that you struggle with, or are you happy to arrive at a new place with the voice?
Uh, Thanks for asking me this question because it's affected my life for the last 2.5 years. Ever since I started taking, before started taking testosterone, Because I did my surgery and this whole transition process much very late in the life, so I passed my menopause. Then itself my pitch fell down slightly. Um, then I was, but still my flexibility and my the kind of voice resonance that I hadn't lost. But once I started on testosterone, initially I went down from G sharp to G and F, F sharp and F, and that's when I started freaking out because who these days will sing, who will play harmonium for me if I sing? I mean, if I sing, there is no accompanying artist, so I'm like totally stuck. Then I actually stopped singing for some time because I didn't know how to manage this, but then I would prefer singing independently without giving concerts or any such thing. But then also losing my flexibility totally by March this year, I freaked out because my tan and my as in my speed has come down, my flexibility has come down all of a sudden, and then I really don't know where to go. But then I also had to face my mother's death in between, and then that's when it actually hit me back when I was writing this script. So I decided to take up classes again from one of my seniors. Actually, there were no teachers for me. I mean, nobody kind of agreed to teach me. I asked many teachers, except for two people, nobody agreed. So finally, I'm again learning now. The deal is that I'm more comfortable in E. It feels like I get back my flexibility and everything. But when I learn, I'm learning in C sharp. Uh, but I feel that best is not to dependent on a pitch or a register. Just sing, and that's transverse. That's what I finally arrived at because um, you know when you the thing is that the classical music and the classical training also makes you very dependent on things for you to sing. I think breaking those dependencies also is a way of expressing transfers because right now if I have to sing something like ga re ga sa is my sa because I'm comfortable. When I think, the moment you think, you have to sing. If you keep that ready, then your sa is the most comfortable because you're singing and speaking in the same voice. And so sa re re ga ga ma pa da ni sa re ga ma ga re sa ni da pa da pa da pa ba ma ga re ga ma ga re sa ni da pa sa re. And so I'm practicing in this pitch. So I'll try to adjust my tanpura for this pitch because I'm at least getting some kind of a texture and a feeling in this voice. Unlike when I try to sing in the male register or female register. Female register is out of question now. I can't sing in that. So the best thing is feel yourself, feel your body, where you can when you sing, when you say it has to resonate in your body. Which will resonate in your body is you have to decide. Why depend on Tanpura? Why depend on anybody else? Why depend on any other thing? You have a Tanpura inside you. So figure that out and cash it out. I mean, that's all I can say right now. I'm still practicing, still learning. So I'm back. I'm back again to sa re 5,000 times a day. So I have no other explanation than this. One thing, who has assigned this kind of a voice, the melodious female, a very high pitched voice? Who has assigned it to women? That's the cisgendered heteropatriarchal Brahminical society. So I think you have to come out to sing in your own voice, which don't matter. It doesn't matter that you need to get some validity for being a woman or for being a man. No, that doesn't really matter. What you sing actually should matter. Pavel is singing, not woman or man. Now that we have to cut out. That's how we can move beyond genders. Because even when you say Pavel, the woman, and you are stuck in one box. So through voice or through when it comes to a certain art, or when it comes to a certain body expressions, the way you are, whatever, I think what we need to focus is I can present to you what I am. I can't adjust to the society's needs and present you. When I start adjusting to the society's needs, I feel miserable. Why do I want to present a failed part of it? When you sing in your most comfortable pitch and most comfortable voice, you will sing the best. But if you try to sing like Lata Mangeshkar or other women who have sung in such high pitches, which is really impossible, that I think is a big mistake. Now let's go back a century. When you heard Begum Akhtar, when you heard Zohrabai Agrawali, when you heard Siddheshwari Devi, they never stuck to any gender in their singing. They just sang. They can teach us how we have to respond to our voices. Actually, I'm also still going through the journey. I don't know where I'll reach, whether I'll be able to sing a performance of Hindustani classical music again, not as a man or woman, but as me. I don't know if I'll be able to do it, but then I'm practicing because I want to do it. That's all. That's all I can say. I just use it in a very humorous context. I wanted to make fun of myself in my dead men because people used to, the way people used to call me Sumati, 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 it used to make me feel very irritated. But also, it is not a very good name because I used to make fun of the name Sumati because so it comes from a very context of a very Savarna, uh, good woman, good being good woman kinds of a name, and I was named that, but I was exactly opposite. So my mother actually used to make fun of me, saying, "Oh, you're not Sumati, you're Durmati." So I'm like, this whole conversation is also, the name is also very Sanskritized. So that's why I wanted one part of the script, which is my narrative about my dead name. I wanted to make fun of it because even while I was growing up, I never liked the name Sumati. So uh, that way, I wanted one kind of humor to be running around that name because it's so Brahminized way of addressing somebody. So I kind of made a humor out of it.